Thanks, guys, for being here. We've been talking. The three of us have been talking on and off for a few days, and like here while we've been setting up just about this whole thing. I don't really even know what to call it other than a thing, but I appreciate your willingness to sit down and we can have some more formal conversation about it. A lot of it has been off the cuff so far, and allowing us to record it too, just so maybe we can help to set an example for a way forward. I think, like I was sharing with you guys before, that I am running into this, I guess, personal problem of feeling like I need to have an answer, or I need to have a way forward, like to lead people. But there's in some cases and in some instances, it's hard for me to know where to lead people when I don't even know necessarily where I'm going either, because the conversation, for me at least, gets really confusing. One of the things that I endeavor to do or want to do is just to exemplify what it means to be able to have honest conversation with people without it becoming like fractured into positions or parties or partisanship or race or belief. Like I think big enough about our relationship as brothers in Christ that we're going to be able to talk about something that it seems like a good portion of the world or a good portion of our country is like so tense about. And I guess that's part of why I don't know if you can tell, I'm a little nervous and a little on edge because it seems like all my experience with having conversations like this is that it just brings out the worst in people. And I don't want that for us. And by us, I mean as a people. I don't think that's going to happen here. But I guess the thing that I want to start out by kind of saying is like, I have a keen awareness of who I am. I am a white guy who lives in a predominantly white area. I think the most recent statistics about at least the city of Jamestown is like 8% black people, and like 15% Hispanic, and then the rest are white or of mixed race or whatever. So it's like we're a predominantly white area. I have lived here my entire life, and that's my reality. That's the world that I live in. Now I have aspects of my story that everyone has their individual stories. Like, my mom was a single mom. She passed away this year from addiction, and so that's a part of my reality. So it'd be like if one of you came to me and were like, it's not, or even that you go to a single mom and be like, it's not hard to be a single mom. It's not hard to be a single mom, it's not hard to have a parent who's an addict. Because I can show you all these reasons that it's not hard. It's easy for someone to say, it's not, when they haven't lived it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And when we get into all these conjectures and opinions and proclamations about what life is not, when we speak from just our very personal and limited perspective. It's not that our perspective is bad, but it's uniquely and only ours. So just like I just like you guys would have, it'd be silly for you to say, well, what you experienced in your life is not such and such, because I know it's not, is foolish. And what I've experienced a lot in this life and in this area is people saying, you know, we live in a good place, and racism really isn't a thing here. You know, it's not a thing here. Um, and shockingly, all the people who say that racism isn't a thing here happen to be white. And so I'm wondering if you can help me understand a little of your experiences as, particularly as Black men. You know, we wanted to have Lauren here tonight with us as well to give her perspective as a Black woman, and she had to work, and so it wasn't. We had to have her on another time, but from your perspectives, and kind of like, there's I mean, there's not a huge generational gap here, but you know, Rich is a little bit more mature in age, shall we say?
I am.
Than than Billy, and obviously you guys have your own experiences. But tell me just a little bit about, like, if someone were to say to you, I don't think racism is really a thing around here. Does your life experiences match up with that, or does your life experience seem to be a little bit different than that?
I'm a social worker by trade. That's my profession. I remember the first time that I met with a client. At the time, I was working someplace where the needs of the client predominantly were we were dealing with those that were HIV infected, doing education and prevention. First day I'm meeting this client, walks into my office, looks at me, literally from foot to head and back to foot, sits down, plops in the chair in front of my desk, and says to me, it's tough being a man with HIV and the discrimination I have to face. And I knew coming in, because I was kind of going into the meeting, that I was forewarned that this guy was, he prefers white case managers, and they asked me, do you want the case? I mean, well, give it to us. I'll gladly take it, and I didn't think it was going to be that soon that we were going to have to address the fact that I'm his case manager, and yes, I'm Black. So I looked at him in the eye and I said, wherever you go, no one knows that you're HIV positive unless you introduce them to that fact. Wherever I go, they know I'm Black. They see me coming, So when I hear that question about racism in this area doesn't exist, for me, it exists everywhere that I go. Every time that I wake up and start a new day and address my day, like wherever I go, it's clear and present in my life. So.
I think I've had a little bit of a different experience. Growing up in Jamestown, there's a mixture that happens. And I saw somebody address this on Facebook where, the person on Facebook was a white man. He grew up in Jamestown. He's a year or two younger than me. And his experience was so similar to mine. You grow up and you get to know people. There's a mixture of people around here that you hang out with, that you deal with, and they just become your friends. So it could be a rich white kid from a certain area of town that's best friends with a young Black or Hispanic person that lives in a totally different environment, but you all become friends through sports or however you become friends. That's how I grew up here. Uh, every once in a while, we were talking about this earlier. Every
Yeah.
once in a while, there would be an N word thrown around or something like that from a white person in a derogatory way. Mostly just kids. Maybe they just learned what it means, or maybe they just wanted to hurt your feelings or something. But it wasn't. Racism wasn't a prevalent thing, and I don't believe it's still such a high. There's such a high incidence here, or it's abnormal or anything like that. But I have a mixed family. My mom is half white, so I'm a little lighter than some others and experienced some disrespect and some racism from my own people because I wasn't black enough.
Mm.
Um, so my experience has been a little bit different. I've grown up knowing about it. I used to read a lot. I grew up knowing about all of this stuff, but I didn't really experience it all that often. Growing up here in a small town.
Yeah. Do now I know you lived in Florida for a year or a couple years or whatever. Rich, have you always been local here, or have
No.
there been other areas that you've lived and so have a comparison about the like race issue here and race issue other places?
Yeah, I'm born and raised in New York City. That's where I lived most of my life. I went away to school at a very young age, Milton, Pennsylvania. And it's maybe just a little bit bigger than Jamestown. Um, and then I went to Houghton College. So, yeah, and then I landed here in Jamestown. Wherever I've lived, I've faced racism. So in New York City, growing up, if I'd be walking down the street early evening, 5, 6 o'clock, it's not unusual if a lady is walking up the street or someone's walking up the street and they see me coming, they'll cross early. It's not unusual as a young black male in an urban area, you walk into a store and it's not so much only the eye that follows you up and down the aisle, but then, the store clerk or another store clerk will nod to another one and you're being followed.
They just happen to stock the shelves everywhere you go,
I
right?
need to, fix the toilet paper right here, right where you're standing, or I need to price check this thing, so you get used to it. I remember one time I was running late for school. I was in high school and I ran to the bus stop and I just got there as the bus was leaving. I was like, oh man, there's a lady that had just gotten off the bus. She's waiting to cross the street. And I asked her, ma'am, do you have the time? Because I need to know, do I have time to catch the next bus or do I need to run 2 or 3 blocks ahead past the bus to get to the next bus stop, And she, before I could even get the word out my mouth, she's like, I have no dime. I have no dime. She didn't speak a lot of English, but she thought I was asking her for money and she grabbed her purse and she didn't even watch if traffic had cleared. She darted. And I'm like, wow, you really thought I was going to mug you and you took off, So is that racism? I mean, but it's a prejudice, but you face it, And when I went away to school and I was at Milton, I stayed with one of my teachers and I can't remember what I did. I was young, and his form of punishment was to make me sleep in the backseat of his car, the dead of winter. It was, I don't know, how many degrees below, freezing, sleeping in the back of the car. And I think he did that because he had this little black child staying in his house, and he just wanted to prove a point. And what was I gonna do? I was hours away from New York City. I'm not calling mom and dad. And with other incidences of racism that you face, you learn at a young age, or at least I felt I learned at a young age. You bury it and deal with it and just keep on going. So, Houghton College, we were coming back from hanging out one night. We stopped at a diner to get something to eat. I had a friend just email me about this the other day when everything happened and some things I had posted. He mentioned this, and we're sitting at the diner, we're waiting for our food. There's another guy at the counter. He's just kind of like looking over at us, looking over at us. And, we're college kids. We're being a little rowdy, laughing, joking, and we're tired. We just want to get some food and go home. And he looks at us. He swings his chair, and he tells us, y'all need to get out. Just leave. And one of my friends is like, well, why do we need? Are we being too loud? He goes, I don't care how loud you're being. We just don't like blacks and Hispanics up in here. Wow. And I remember a friend that was with us, he started taking off his glasses, started taking off his earring, because that's a sign he's ready to go. And the owner comes out and says, no, your drinks, your meal, everything's on me. And he looked at the guy and he said, you need to go. And then he made the guy leave. And then he told us, he goes, I'm Native American. I've seen that crap my whole life. Y'all are young. Y'all are away from home. Y'all are in school. You don't need to deal with that. Please enjoy your meal. And he went back to the back. And I thought that was nice the way he handled that,
Mm-hmm.
But it could have been, who knows, it could have been a much worse scenario for us. So wherever I've gone, I faced racism. You just learn to deal with it.
There's the phrase, the movement, the tagline. I'm not even sure what to call it, but if memory serves me, it originated back when Eric Garner was killed. The phrase Black Lives Matter. And we were talking earlier about how we don't really know, or at least I don't know, like what that even really means. I mean, I get it. Like, of course I get it. Black Lives Matter, And then everyone wants to say, well, or then not everyone, but people want to say, well, all lives matter. Well, duh. Yeah, of course all lives matter. But that's not the point. And we were talking earlier too about how, like, unfortunately there has now come some like hijacking, I think, of that phrase Black Lives Matter. And it probably means something different to everyone. But if I were to ask you, what does it mean to you? Like, what does that phrase Black Lives Matter, like when you see it on signs for protests or you see it on the news or whatever, like what does it evoke in you? And like what does it kind of feel like or mean for you?
I think for me, it's a mixture for me. It's a complicated situation. I get the sentiment behind it. I get that people want to they want to help. They want to bring attention. They want to shed light on the fact that it doesn't seem that Black Lives Matter equally. That it doesn't seem that we're treated equally. So we have to cry out extra and say, hey, we matter too. Black Lives Matter. These people matter.
Look at me.
But in a way, it's also causing some division to say Black Lives Matter because of some of that hijacking that you were talking about. It's hijacked by well-meaning people to join a cause and join a movement and fight for Black lives to matter as much as anybody else. And it's also hijacked by people that mean harm and that want to keep things segregated and want to look at the situation and as a black and white or black versus this group or, I don't.
But they're making it seem like, well, you don't believe that Black Lives Matter. We believe that Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
So like now we're gonna separate into our two camps.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I felt a lot of that on the internet mostly. And I know a lot of well-meaning people that are trying to shed light, like I said, on the fact that we should all matter as equals. We should all matter. So we have to bring attention when there's an injustice and say Black Lives Matter, because it doesn't seem like they do. Um, but I think the maybe a better way to go about that is not to separate somebody and say Black Lives Matter or even all lives matter, because we do. So you don't have to say that. It's just to join the cause, maybe shed light in another way, not under necessarily a banner of this Black Lives Matter, but just join together with people around you and ask, have conversations like
Like
this.
dialogue, actually.
Get to know the issue that a Black person faces.
Like, instead of just posting a meme,
Exactly.
Black Lives Matter, like maybe you ought to sit down with some Black people and figure out about their, learn about their life.
Maybe.
Because then you'll know that it matters, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
I when I preached this past Sunday, like I didn't want to go just to like a like Webster's and be like definition of racism. That felt a little cheap. So like my definition of racism was like the fundamental devaluing of like the sacredness that God gives a person by like just their outward appearance. So like God has created you, and he's created me, and he's created everyone. And because God has created us, we have sacred worth. And so for me to look at Rich, for me to look at Billy, for me to look at anyone and say, you fall below me in the hierarchy of sacredness before God because of the way you look, because of your skin color. Like I'm more important than you. I'm higher on the hierarchical like chain ladder, spiritually, economically, socially, philosophically, like whatever ladder you want to put it on. That to me is saying like we don't have all equal value in the eyes, in the sight of God. And I think that like when we have an idea, when we, at least in my perspective, when I'm able to attach or understand racism through the eyes of like through some like theological eyes, it helps to like, it becomes a no-brainer to me of being like, of wanting to do everything that I possibly can in order to be anti-racist. Like to be like, no, like we're not just going to be not racist. We're going to fight so that every man, woman, and child knows their intrinsic value and sacredness to God. And wherever there is an injustice, where a person's system, whatever, fundamentally like opposes the sacredness of a person's life, like I want to be the first one in line to be like that this is wrong and we're going to fight for this. And so I appreciate what you said, Billy, about like I appreciate what you said about all that, because I feel like I was able to make some connections in what I had been thinking. But Rich, what is your perspective on that slogan or phrase or movement? And what do you consider it? Do you consider it a slogan? Do you consider it a movement? Do you consider it a, like, I guess I don't know what to call it other than a,
It is a movement. This falls right in line with when you called me the other day and you were just asking me how I am. Like, I don't know. Like, that's the toughest thing that I've struggled with throughout all this, because like I said, I'm getting up there in age, and like I'm getting to the point where I've lived most of my life, and I guess this is just a real stark grab you by the shoulders and force you to say, like, this is what your life has been, like, this is what you've had to deal with your whole life. And that's a tough thing for me to have to deal with right now, because not that I thought we were so far along, or not that I thought racism was dead and gone, but to see the state that the country is in, it's a beautiful thing, but it's also a sad thing at the same time. Um, I'm at a point now where I think of my kids. I'm proud of them. The age that they are, that they see injustices being done and they want to speak up, and I encourage them after all the community stuff that I've been involved in my throughout my life. To see them do that, I'm proud of them. That they know to stand up for the underdog and everything. But I worry about their safety.
Sure.
Um, there was a time where I just had to. I thought I was lucky if I made it to my 18th birthday. We were talking about this earlier, and then my son was born, and a few years later, and I'm thinking, like, wow, like, not only do I have to worry about myself, but I have to worry. And that was a time when they were only killing young black men. Now they're killing young black men and women, and, like, I've got a daughter and a son, and I got to think about that, And when I think of Black Lives Matter, I mean, it's sad that it had to come to fruition, So I agree with you. Like, I think, yeah, there are some that will take it and use it for the wrong meaning and everything, I don't know. I mean, you have to come back to me on that one, I guess. I think it's important. And then, you hear the response, well, all lives matter. The only thing I can say, I read something, is when the shootings happened in Vegas, or, everybody rallied around those that were affected by it. No one said, well, what about what's going on in Arizona? And anytime there's a crisis, we come around those that are going through that crisis. So why is it that when blacks are going through something like this, there has to be that, response? Well, these lives matter, or white lives matter, or, Asian lives. Like, that's never been done with anything else. But when it comes to, like, having these hard talks on racism and the issues that blacks are facing, why is that something that we have to face as well? So when I see that, that's when I wish, like, okay, well, maybe, let's do away with it and let's come at it from another angle, like you said.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. It does seem to be pretty heavy-handed, because it elicits, like, that phrase elicits some pretty strong response.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's like, sometimes you have to say things like in such an obvious, something that is so, like, self-evident and obvious, and that you think that you shouldn't have to say it, but the whole situation is so absurd that you have to say it. And it almost, like, and I don't, it's not to make a mockery out of the saying, but it's like, it almost is an absurd saying, because, like, have we really have we really disowned our conscience so much that we need to be we need to be reminded that all blacks matter, and then we're going to fight over it? Then we're going to fight over whether or not it's a thing we should say? Like, that to me just seems like it seems absurd that it's even a matter of debate, but it does elicit just an incredible amount of, like, tension.
Yeah.
There's another phrase that elicits a lot of tension. The phrase white privilege. I want to come back to that, though. I want to remind. I'm saying that so I remind myself, because there's something that you said that I want to talk about a little bit more.
Okay.
Is when you were talking about your son and your daughter, you used to, worry just about your son. Now, you worry about your daughter as well. The shooting of Breonna Taylor
Mm.
was, it's a horrific story. It's a horrific story. Um, but one of the ways in which you described it, I think, is a part of the is a factor in the overall tension that people feel um, when we say like um, they're killing black men, they're killing black women, and then we ask the question: Is this? I'm going to be careful, of course. I don't know how to ask the question other than like just ask it. Is it a police versus black people issue? Is it that and more than that? Is it that and other things? Because we talked about our relationships with police officers, right? And but again, I haven't had the same experiences that you guys have had. But it is becoming a part of it's becoming a part of the overall conversation now, right?
Yeah.
Like obviously this whole thing precipitated with, at least in the format it is now, with George Floyd and Derek Chauvin and the other 3 police officers that were there, and now there's obviously calls for defunding police departments and police universally being the enemy of even white people who are joining the calls for justice to be done. So, can you help me unpack or understand like the tension in relationship there? When how do we talk about that?
It's a real slippery slope. So I have friends that are police officers on multiple levels. State trooper friends and local police friends,
Sheriffs.
sheriffs, sheriffs. Um, it's it's there are bad apples in every bunch, in every walk of life. Um, there are also people that make mistakes in the heat of a moment. I think to lump everybody into one category or another as black people, if we look at the police and say, it's all the cops are against us, that's no better than them looking at us black people and saying that black person is suspicious. He's gonna rob me, or
Because he's black.
because he's black.
Exactly.
We're looking at their uniform and saying they are all da da da. They're looking at our uniform, our skin color, and what they know about black people from their own experience or from the experience of, like you mentioned, their brotherhood of police officers, whether they're local brotherhood or the overall badge, and saying, they're a certain way. So that's why it's important to have conversation. It's important to establish relationships. It's important to just not lump everybody together, because I don't agree with everything my own people do. And I wouldn't necessarily want to be represented by somebody who did something wrong just because we're the same color or whatever. I have my own life and make my own choices.
That's right.
So there are certainly awesome law enforcement out there. I'm not against the police. I don't walk around and saying, I'm scared of the police or anything like that. However, I do realize that, we get profiled, or, there are questions that are asked during a
Routine traffic
routine
stop.
traffic stop that would not get asked if we were in a different neighborhood or driving a different car or being a different color. So it's tough.
Ditto.
Yeah.
I mean, he said it all. And it speaks true for me too. I have friends that are cops. I also believe that not every cop is a bad cop.
Sure.
I think that's the narrative right now because of the state the country is in. And let's be real. If we're gonna have a real talk about racism and a hard talk about racism and police brutality, we've seen this story get told time and time and time and time again. And there's not been too much in the way of how that story ends. And I think the only difference nowadays is with social media and camera phones, we're seeing it a lot more. I was talking with John Staley earlier today, and we were talking about, like, if we can just put a pause on racial tensions, police brutality, just for a quick moment, and take it and put it here on the side. Let's look at the bigger picture, and let's ask the bigger question. And that is, as a society, as a people, like, how much is enough? Some of the images, some of the stark images that we're seeing. We watched a man on the ground with a knee to his neck for almost 9 minutes. Your kids could have easily just clicked a button and seen that image. My kids could have on their phone just swiped and easily seen that footage. And I'm thinking, like, there was a time where certain things were just, I hate using the word censored, but, at least kept away from innocent eyes. And as a society, like, just when you think of, like, violent images and gore and all that, like, it's almost like we crave it to the point that news and journalists are, like, willing to feed us that. And I only say, like, let's look at that because not as, like, the black race or the white race, just as the human race, like, when is enough?
Yeah.
When can we just start to love and respect one another? I mean, but on pause, bring it back.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to deal with, And so it would be really interesting to have this conversation, but maybe have some of our police friends, because they're human too, Yeah. They've got to deal with this too. There's no other job. We were saying it earlier. There's no other job where you get up in the morning, you kiss your wife, you kiss your kids, say goodbye, and know for a fact that you're coming back, That's their reality. So I would love to have that conversation with them and maybe be able to ask them some stark questions as to, like, what you saw with that image, is that normal practice? Is that what you would do in that situation? I mean,
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've talked about it so many times that some of the finest men and women that I know are police officers.
Yeah.
Some of our best friends, like people that we worship with,
yes.
had in my home. I've trusted my kids to, like, have sleepovers, like, trust them with my life, not just because they're police officers, but because I love them, And like, everyone has read the sensationalized stories of pastors who do horrible things, right?
Right.
Does that mean that, like, everyone gets to walk in and, like, be mad at me
No.
for that person, Or, like, how many of us have gone and sat down in a restaurant and had a hair or a booger in our salad or something like that? Like, all restaurants are bad.
Right.
Never eating a salad again. Every chef is disgusting. Like, we don't do that,
No.
right?
No.
But I also think that there is like you know, the stakes are so incredibly high
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
when it comes to the relationship between a police officer and someone that they're dealing with on a professional basis. The stakes are so high that I think it does demand maybe more consideration or question than a hair in your salad.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, but I have no doubt that some of the men and women that I know that are police officers and that I train, you know, like I hope police officers learn defensive tactics in a way that is responsible and effective, right? And can tell you, you know, like flat out that that's not how a police officer is trained.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not it. And I don't know a police officer worth their salt that would say, yeah, that's exactly what I would have done too. I don't know a single one, and maybe I just don't know the right ones. But okay, well, I think to hear from both of you kind of uncategorically that like, yeah, it's the bad apple
Yeah.
that always seems to define or determine the opinion of the rest.
Right.
I want to go back to the somewhat incendiary phrase, white privilege. Now, I have my own thoughts on this, and I'm going to tell you right now that there were some really distinctive times in my life where if someone would have talked about my white privilege, I would have been like pretty offensive.
I was wondering. I was going to ask you that.
Yeah. It to me, it would have been like, I would have been really offended to hear that statement. And I have reacted offensively when people have talked about like my white privilege. Like, well, what do you know? You know, you're white and you have privilege. I don't know exactly what is changing in me. I don't know if it's just like maturity over time, if it's you read, how it's like sometimes phrases that weren't meant to mean something end up meaning something completely different over time. And it has almost universally become like a negative term to white people.
Right.
Your privilege. Where I am beginning to see it and hear it not necessarily as a negative term, but just a descriptor of the way in which I've experienced the world. Like I've experienced the world with white skin on. I've experienced the world through white eyes. Actually, do you mind if I talk a little bit more on this before I
No, go ahead.
hear what you guys have to say
Go
about
ahead.
it?
Go ahead.
I think about the situation, the real stark situation with George Floyd, and I'm like, okay. I draw two scenarios, two diverting scenarios. One is, okay, what if George Floyd did not die on that street that day? What would I say George should do? I would say George should go to the police department the next day and ask to speak to the supervisor in charge or whatever, the sergeant or whatever, captain, that he should file a formal written complaint, that he should give the video as evidence, right? And that he should use every avenue for for justice in that scenario as possible. And then I asked myself a real honest question. Would that have done anything? And I am fairly smart enough to know to say, I would hope that it would do something, but I think I know the answer to the question. That it probably would have done, it would go in that circular file cabinet that we all talked about, right? The one that holds all the paper, right? That circular file cabinet behind the desk. And that, to me, is kind of like well, that kind of stinks. Because then my other scenario is this. If I was the person on the ground under that officer's knee, and I lived, and I went the next day, and I had the camera footage, and I filled out the report, and I demanded to talk to the superior officer or whatever, would I expect that the outcome of that would have been any different for me than it was for George Floyd, because I am white and he is black? Now, maybe it's my ignorance and naivety, but I think my skin color would have made a difference.
Can I ask you the same question, but slightly different?
Yeah.
If you were in that situation as Pastor Cameron, as a white man, do you think you would have ended up on the ground at all?
Probably not. No. I don't. And I'm sure there are people out there that would, give 1,000 reasons why. Well, of course he wouldn't, because he wouldn't be breaking the law, and he wouldn't be doing this, and he wouldn't be doing that, and so of course he wouldn't be resisting arrest, and so he wouldn't need to have someone kneel on his head for 9 minutes, and like, I'm not even going to get into that because it's just foolish.
Exactly.
It's just foolish talk, right? It doesn't matter if George Floyd was and I mean, the reports have come out. He was convicted, right? He had done jail time, like, I haven't read every single report, and I'm not an expert in the law, but guess what I do know is that the man still has sacred worth in the eyes of God, and did not deserve to lose his life. Black, white, brown, tan, yellow, red, purple. I don't care who he is. It didn't make a difference. But what I do know is that if it would have been me, and I would have survived that, I would have pulled every social, networking string I knew, every resource I had, every favor to call in. I would have demanded justice.
Yeah.
Or if it was my son, and I would have seen that happen to my son, there would not be anything or anyone left standing until I got justice for my son. Nothing.
We're all fathers, and I think we all feel what you're saying. I think
What I'm saying is that I understand that the world would have related to me differently if I was in that situation than they would have related to George if he lived and tried to do the same things that I did. And because I have kind of this intrinsic understanding of, I would have got justice, because guess what? As a white person, I've never experienced a vapid sense of injustice. Because it's always just been like, well, I'll get justice because I know this guy and 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 this guy, and I have these resources, and I'll do this, and I'll create this kind of a stink, and people aren't going to look at me sideways because I've never been, I've never been this, I've never been that, I've never, I'm not black, so there is definitely this sense of yeah, the world in which I live in is a just white world, because I will get justice for myself or for the ones that I know, or like for the ones that I love. So why then, why does a man or a woman who have different colored skin, why are they not afforded the same benefits of justice that I am? And anyone says, well, they are,
But they're not.
is ignoring the very real reality that if George Floyd would have lived and would have went into that police station as a convicted felon, even with all the evidence showing a horrible, brutal situation, nothing would have happened. And so that's like, oh, white privilege doesn't exist. It does exist. You just haven't lived in an area where you've been so devoid of justice that you can see the stark reality
Yeah.
that your skin color has afforded you.
There are those that will say the fact that you get to make that affirmation, whether for yourself or your son, I will get justice,
Yeah.
and know that you will get justice,
Mm-hmm.
is white privilege in and of itself.
Sure, because most black people
'Cause-
in a situation like that wouldn't have even gone to the police department because it was gonna be a waste of my time.
I'll be honest with you. As much as I say that I have, friends that are on the police force and they're good friends and they're good guys, good Christian guys, we worship. If I was in the position that George Floyd was in, but I lived and I too wanted to seek justice, I don't know that I would get it. I don't know that I could make the same affirmation. I'm going to try, but at some point I'm going to hit a roadblock and they're going to say, listen, it happened. You were able to get up and walk away. Your bruises were minimal. Your injuries were minimal, if any at all.
Mm-hmm.
Call it a wash.
Is it patronizing? Is it a patronizing statement to say, well, Rich, if that ever happened to you, I would make sure that you got justice?
I believe that you mean that sincerely.
Yeah.
So it would not be patronizing, but there's another reason why it would not be patronizing. I've learned to deal with it enough that, just let it go. Brush it under the rug.
Yeah.
That's racism. That's my experience with racism. And maybe that's part of the numbness, and it's sad that it has to be that way, but it's like, I still got to live my life.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot, being like, well, yeah, is it patronizing for me to say, well, yeah, if I had a black friend and that happened to them, I would make sure that they got justice and be like, okay, here comes the white guy, doing the white thing,
No.
saving the black guy.
No.
I don't want that. But I also think that it's a part of the responsibility that we have as Christians to say, no, not on my watch, not in my city, not in my world, like not going to happen, not acceptable under any circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of for me, it feels like a both.
It is.
It's a tough question to answer.
Relationships play a factor too.
Sure.
Because we have a relationship, and you say that to me because you see the world we live in, and you know that we're hurting. We may not know how to express that pain. If you said that to us, I don't think either one, I can't speak for Billy, but I don't feel he also would think that that's patronizing, because we know you. We know you mean it sincerely. Mm-hmm. If another white person that I don't know came and said that to me, I might be a little apprehensive. I'm gonna be like, okay, thank you, but why? Because that doesn't happen, But yeah, that's white privilege. I mean,
so I talked a lot about white privilege, but like, do you guys have thoughts on?
It definitely exists. It exists. It's there. People can deny it or say that they've never, played the white privilege card or whatever they want to say, but
It's because they don't have to.
they don't have to.
Right? No
don't
one has a
have
card
to.
that carries that says.
That's where I was getting.
Here, I'm going to give you my trump card. It's called white privilege.
Yeah, we don't. They don't have to play that card because it's always in play.
I say that the very fact that racism exists is a proof that white privilege exists.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Because there would be
Yes.
no racism would not be a thing, right?
Right.
Like, so like I'm like what I want to do to all white people is be like, all right, don't call it white privilege then. If it offends you that much, if it offends your delicate sensibilities to think that you have a privilege, that's fine. Tell me this: does racism exist or does it not exist?
Mhm.
I don't know anyone that says no, it doesn't exist. You know, at all. Okay, so if you can agree that racism exists, then you can agree that there are societal benefits that white people get that black people or other minorities do not, correct?
Especially if racism has not directly affected you. So if you can say, yes, racism exists, but I've never really had it affect me in my life, that's white privilege.
You're privileged. You're a privileged person who happens to be white.
Yes. Yes. It does exist. And it's the fact that the race card exists. It's a card that is said that we pull out and say, oh, it's because we're black. We have to draw attention to that at times because of unfair treatment. So if you were on the ground under the knee of a police officer and you were able to get up and demand justice and all of that, you would get that. We have been under police brutality, and George Floyd has gotten up. His name was Rodney King. Yeah. And they dragged him through the mud, just like they're doing with George Floyd now, bringing up his past, bringing up his habits, his hang-ups, to dismiss the fact that he was attacked by white officers that were, there were accusations of racism and different things in their pasts, and in this situation, brutality against minorities in other situations. Part of a police unit that was known for corruption and targeting minorities for various reasons. And if you can say that has never affected you, then you're privileged.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We're sitting here at Conduit, which is our church home, and I love this place. I know you guys love this place.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's a pretty special place. We don't have a 50-50 split of black people here, right? Black to white.
Right.
But it's not you guys aren't the only black people right here, right? We have other black people that attend church here, right? So and I did, right?
You counted them all.
We got them. It was real quick,
finger
right?
or two left.
Yeah. But I, in all fairness, like for those of us who are watching, like I just like am so cognizant of not wanting to say the wrong thing right now, or say nothing at all, or do the wrong thing, or create more division or controversy or tension or whatever. Like, I flat out asked you guys when I talked to you on the phone last week, hey, I don't want to use excuse the phrase, I don't want to use your blackness as leverage to just create content. Right. That's not the way that we jive here. What I want to do is I want to be able to model healthy dialogue, healthy conversation that's honest about some of the real questions that we have. Like, what is Black Lives Matter? What is white privilege? What is this relationship? And so that's what I want to do here at Conduit. That being said, I have questions about what can the church, the Big C church, do? What is your experience in the church been, and like maybe talk about like maybe the real hard question, maybe the hardest question of all is, have you ever felt any anything like negative while you were here at Conduit because you're black?
Before I answer that, I just want to revisit the white privilege question. And I think a lot of people don't understand sometimes that white privilege can be something as slight as even like, for instance, right now, if you and your wife were deciding like, we're going to move to a nicer neighborhood, you don't have to worry or take into consideration as you're looking at homes how your children will be received by that neighborhood. Maybe you do, but I don't think to the extent that like a black couple that's looking to move will. You look at schools. How are the schools?
Yeah.
The area is the area safe?
Yeah.
Is there a park close by so that my young kids, can go
Yeah.
and play? That kind of thing. Are there other kids their age in that neighborhood so they'll have friends to play with? A black couple or a mixed couple going into a situation like that, that's one of the first things that they probably think about. Will we be accepted?
Or will my kids even
My
like
kids, yeah,
more sensitively be
exactly.
accepted?
When they look at the schools, not just like where they rank in terms of like graduation rate and how successful their students go on to become, but also, is it a diverse population?
Well, and a lot of people might say, well, that's their problem. That's not your problem. You move into whatever neighborhood you want. Well, it's easy to say when you have neighbors that don't mind seeing you
Exactly.
mow your lawn, right?
Mhm.
Who allow their, like old man who shares the popsicle over the fence to the neighbor,
Exactly.
it is a real issue.
Yeah.
Once again, let's not draw caricatures. This is real life experience.
Exactly.
Right? This is
Exactly.
not like theoretical, oh, don't worry about them. If that happens, you just do your own thing. No, like this is painful. And it's real.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why would we consider throwing our families into a potentially upsetting, world-changing, world-shaking situation?
I wouldn't do it to my kids, so why would anyone want to do
Exactly.
it to their kids?
Exactly.
All right.
Okay. Church, Conduit.
I came to Conduit, a year and a half, 2 years ago,
2 years ago, yeah.
when it was a very difficult time in my life, low point in my life. And I don't even know how I ended up at Conduit. I just knew I had to be somewhere. I know how I ended up here. God brought me here, But ever since then, ever since I've been here, I've never experienced anything but love from the church. Everyone has been amazing, very open, has been very understanding, and has helped with my growth here. So no, as a black man at Conduit Church, no, I've never experienced anything but love and safe. I feel safe here.
What about you, B-Dubs?
No. I mean, you come in these doors and you notice, you look around. I mean, I know as a black person, when I walk into a room, I look around. Sometimes I'm looking for people like me. Sometimes I'm just looking to see who all is there. I know a lot of people here. I knew a lot before I started coming here. I knew a lot from other churches or other situations. And the people here represent the love of Christ in the best of ways. Reaching out.
Get an A, Conduit.
Yes.
A.
Reaching
Great job.
out. Reaching out to each other here. Reaching out to the communities. That's what this place is about. Never experienced any sort of never experienced any hiccup of a, hey, thought never had anything negative racially or anything like that going on here. It's so comforting to be in a place where um, color's not a thing. I don't believe anybody that comes here and is a conduit and is here and knows the culture thinks anything about color.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the love of Christ, and I think that's what also makes all this other stuff so hard. When we're talking about color so much, when we're talking about the division so much, as Christians, we are to model Christ's love. And Christ's love is inclusive. So some of these other groups or, different ways that people are protesting or different things are drawing such attention to the divisive issues of color and things like that, that as a Christian, I don't go into it like that. I don't go into it looking for division. I'm looking to where we're the same, looking for the
Right.
points
Unity.
of unity,
Yeah.
looking for the points that we can agree on and kind of bond.
Mm-hmm.
That's what conduit represents to me.
Right.
We bond in Christ here. We
Right.
bond in love. We bond in serving others, and I love it.
Yeah, well, like Paul says that we all have the same spirit, like one faith, one baptism, one Lord, one Spirit, one God and Father in us all. Right. The thing that unites us is not that, you're black and you're black and I'm white and he's white or she's white or black, whatever. Like, or that you believe in this or that I believe in this. Like we could name a million things that could divide us. That's easy.
Yeah.
Right? But the one thing that brings us together, and the thing, at least here at Conduit, that surpasses all of those things is that Jesus is everything, right?
Amen.
That's our number one core value. And so, like, we can agree on that, and that's the thing that brings us together.
Yeah.
That's the thing that unites us. Well, what can, like, are there things that the church can do? Like, I have ideas and thoughts, mainly because I think about church stuff all day long, all the time. But, like, again, it's my perspective, my story. Like, what do you feel like are there gaps in the things that the church does, doesn't do, talks about, doesn't talk about, that need to be done?
This is the first step.
Yeah.
I mean, change happens with dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you invited us out, to not just talk, but to sincerely like check on us and see how we're doing, like that's the first step towards healing. I would say continue that dialogue. The leadership team should probably be having a discussion about this. And whatever direction that God would guide you to go in. I mean, listen to that, follow that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that has always impressed me about Conduit is y'all walk the walk. You don't just talk about it. You guys are about it. And I say that I've been to a lot of other churches and I visit a lot of other churches, and I think a lot of churches want the perception or they want to actually believe that they are making a change in the community that they're in. But oftentimes they don't. Their community is right within those four walls.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are beyond the four walls. So as you look at your outreach ministry and new things you can do, think about how, we can help the community heal, however that may be,
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's hosting a roundtable discussion with local law enforcement and city officials and asking them, what can we do to help you? I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I think that was really well said. This is the first step. Um, Also, I think, and it's really simple, so simple uh, to say that what the church can do to help people in this situation is be the church.
Yeah.
Follow Christ's example of reaching out to the lowly, the lost, the hurting. Use this opportunity, this segment of time right here where people are searching for some kind of healing through this process, some kind of navigation through this process to bring Christ's love to them. And it doesn't have to be a sermon, it doesn't have to be anything formal. Just be who God made us to be. He called us to be, brothers, and He called us to be His witnesses, to go out and take His word to the world. The world right now is hurting. The world right now is searching for something to hold on to that can make things better.
Yeah.
We have that. We already have that. So by giving Christ's love freely without expecting anything in return or anything, that's the biggest thing that I think we can do to help.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. I I agree. Well, like I said, like I don't want to just say, "Oh, I think here's the answer," But I felt like, and I continue to feel like that, we are going to need a lot of dialogue,
Yes. Yeah.
a lot of talking, a lot of listening, a lot of mutual understanding, a lot of us saying, "Okay, I'm going to withhold my strongly held opinions in order to listen."
Mm.
This is something that I usually share with couples that I'm counseling premaritally, but I think it's a good overall principle about the difference between listening to respond and listening to understand. That when we listen to someone, a lot of the times what we do is they say something and we want to respond to what they're saying, right? And so we're forming our response in our head, but they're still talking.
Mm.
So we can't form our response in our head and genuinely listen to the other person at the same time,
Right.
because we're just so overwhelmed by our need to respond to what they said. Where if we just withheld the right that we think that we have to respond and just listened, not to respond, but to understand, then I think things would spiral out of control a lot less.
Mm.
And I think that we would be really taken by the experiences of people.
That's good.
Because, they might, like, everyone who's watching might not agree with your perspectives, with my perspective on white privilege or whatever, but what they can't do is they can't devalue your experience, because it's yours,
Right.
and you own it, right? It only belongs to you. So if they could just listen long enough to have your experience become like reality to them, and they already have relationship with you of being like, "Oh yeah, I love Billy, I love Rich, yeah, they're not lying to me. If this is their experience, it must be true." And so maybe I need to move down the pathway of changing my outlook, because here I have two guys who are saying it is this way for me.
Yeah.
And I trust them. And I trust that when we sit down with Lauren, she'll be able to share similar things. So I think we could talk for a long time.
Definitely.
I don't know how long it's been. It's been probably long enough already. I know it's been long enough already. But maybe we need to do these real talk sessions more often, and regularly, until we begin to have a more common understanding man, what in the heck's going on? I love you guys so much.
Love you too.
And I'm so grateful to be able to do life with you and to be your friend and to be your pastor. And just appreciate your experience and your willingness to come and share. So can we pray? And then
Yes.
we'll close it down for the day. Heavenly Father, we thank you. We thank you for your Holy Spirit that binds us together, Lord, in unity with one another, far, far, far exceeding any color of our skin or any place we grew up or any background or any family or any job or any opinion or position or whatever, Lord, because you have given us your Spirit by faith in Jesus Christ, we are brothers. And we can say that in the truest of sense. We are brothers. Lord, we pray for healing. We pray, Lord, that as we pursue understanding of each other and each other's opinions and positions and experiences, Lord, that we would develop, not just the three of us, but we as a church, we as a people, we as a city, we as a nation would develop a genuine heart sensitivity to the other. That we would begin to allow the Holy Spirit to do some examination on the inside of us. So then we can root out any ways in which we've caused division, and that we can come together in full unity of the Holy Spirit of God. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.